What would you do if the ship beneath your feet was sinking and there weren't enough lifeboats for everyone? This was the cruel reality on Titanic's decks just after midnight on April 15th, 1912. The world's largest ship, over 2,000 souls aboard, and only lifeboats for about half. At first, few believed the danger was real, but within minutes, calm turned to panic. And in the chaos, sacrifice and selfishness would decide who lived and who did not. This is Chapter 5 of the Titanic story: Panic and Sacrifice. When Titanic struck the iceberg, the impact was so gentle that most passengers barely felt it. Many stayed in bed, wrapped in warm sheets, dismissing the noise as nothing more than a shudder. But down below, seawater was already flooding 6 compartments. The truth was spreading among officers and crew. Titanic would sink. Still, Captain Smith ordered calm. No alarm bells, no panic. Stewards knocked politely on cabin doors. "Put on your life jackets. Come on deck." Passengers laughed at the idea. One woman joked, "What? Put on a cork vest at this hour?" But as the minutes ticked by, the truth became undeniable. The ship was dying. Titanic carried 20 lifeboats. Not nearly enough. But even worse, at first, many of them left half empty. Why? Because no one believed Titanic would actually sink. The first lifeboat lowered, number 7, was built to carry 65 people. Only 28 climbed in. Some refused to go, thinking the ship itself was safer than a small boat in the freezing Atlantic. As officers shouted, "Women and children first," confusion spread. Husbands tried to follow wives. Some were pulled back. Some begged. Some promised, "I'll see you in New York." For many, it was the last time they would ever speak. By 1 a.m., the angle of the ship was impossible to ignore. Titanic's bow was dipping lower. The tilt of the decks grew steeper. Now the crowd surged toward the lifeboats. Officers drew their pistols. Some fired warning shots in the air to control the crowd. The rich and the poor stood side by side, desperation in their eyes. The rigid divisions of class were beginning to crumble in the face of survival. One steerage mother, clutching 2 children, begged to be let through the barriers. Crewmen hesitated. Rules said first class first. But in the chaos, many rules shattered. This was no longer about luxury. This was about life. In the middle of the panic, there were moments of astonishing courage. The ship's band gathered on deck. They played music to calm the crowd. Hymns, waltzes, the haunting notes of "Nearer, my God, to Thee." Their bowstrings and brass echoing across the icy sea. None of the musicians survived, but they gave their final hours to comfort others. There were fathers who placed wives and children into lifeboats, refusing to climb in themselves. One man kissed his wife's hand and whispered, "Be brave. I'll see you soon." He never would. There were crew members who worked until the end, loading boats, guiding passengers, fighting to keep order, knowing they had no chance for themselves. And there were priests, ministers, and strangers alike who prayed with the terrified, offering comfort as the ship slipped further into the night. But not all moments were noble. Some men disguised themselves as women to get into lifeboats. Others forced their way in, ignoring the officer's orders. Wealthy passengers sometimes received quiet advantages. In the confusion, money, power, and persuasion meant survival for some and death for others. In one lifeboat, sailors hesitated to lower away. They waited, shouting for more people to climb in. But panic overtook reason. Men leapt, scrambling, crushing others. Officers fired shots into the air. The boat finally descended, swinging wildly above the waves. These were the choices made in the dark. Survival for some, doom for many. By 2 a.m., nearly every lifeboat was gone. Over 1,500 souls still remained on Titanic's decks. The ship's tilt was terrifying now. Deck chairs slid. People stumbled and clung to railings. The roar of the sea grew louder as the bow sank deeper. The last lifeboats filled quickly. Number 23, number 25, number 27. Each carried away precious few survivors. One of the very last, Collapsible D, was lowered just minutes before Titanic's lights flickered out. On deck, those left behind faced the inevitable. No rescue boat remained. No way out. Only the freezing Atlantic below. In the final minutes, panic was everywhere. Some passengers jumped into the sea, desperate to swim for their lives. The water was 28 degrees Fahrenheit, -2 Celsius. Survival time was measured in minutes. Others clung to each other, refusing to be separated. Entire families stood arm in arm as the ship groaned beneath them. And yet, in those desperate moments, there was still sacrifice. The ship's engineers stayed below to keep the power running, giving light until the very end. They never escaped. Over 2,000 people had started this journey. By the time the last lifeboat left, only about 700 had a chance at survival. The rest were still aboard. And then, the Titanic gave a final shudder. The lights flickered. The band's last notes drifted into silence. What happened in those final, terrible minutes as the ship broke apart? How did the survivors in the lifeboats witness the sinking from the freezing sea? That is the story of our next chapter. This has been Dusk Times. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and join us for episode 6, The Final Plunge. Because the sea never forgets, and neither should we.